Okay, good afternoon folks. Hopefully that's streaming now and you can hear what I'm saying. Looks like it's going okay. I hope you can anyway. I've got my microphone on and this is my first go at streaming over YouTube, so whether it works or not remains to be seen. But anyway, hopefully you can see what I'm doing and you can hear what I'm doing as well, because if not we'll have a problem. Okay, anyway, I'll just get started and we'll see what happens. Check. See if it's showing up as streaming on my phone as well. Ah yeah, looks like it. Good stuff, so I'll crack on then. Right, so yeah, this stream that I'm doing today, this is all about painting Nighthaunt, and for this I'm going to paint these Chainrasps here, and it's doing them in a bit of a Grimdark style. And so what I've got here, I've just got two Chainrasps that I made up earlier, and I've already primed them. All I've done is sprayed them black and give them a dry brush with some white just to pick out the details. You can see, I think I'm closer to the camera there. So I've got all this extra texture that I've shoved on top, which is basically just any kind of fabric material like this. This is a bit like cheesecloth, and so I just pull some pieces apart and super glue them on, and just put on a little bit of other texture like dirt and things like that. I've just had a message off someone saying it keeps freezing. I'll go on at the moment and see how it goes, and if not I might have to try and switch to Instagram Live or something like that. Alright, well that's good, at least the volume's coming through okay. That was one of my main worries. The freezing bit might just be it's just a bit of a lag going on it. Could be to do with the fact that my internet is pretty shocking here, but I'll just try and bear with it and crack on. Anyway, so we're going to go for it. I'm going to use the airbrush on this because it's nice and easy, so I'm going to whack the airbrush on now. Hopefully this is not going to be too loud. So we'll just start off by laying some base colours on here. And if you don't have an airbrush, you can also do this with a regular brush as well. It's just a bit quicker and easier for me to do it on a live stream with my airbrush, I think. We'll see, I might regret saying that. But what I'm doing at the moment is I'm loading my brush up with, this is Dark Sea Blue from Vallejo Model Colour, and I've got Mutation Green from Game Colour. None of these paints that I'm going to use, it doesn't really matter what brand they are, it's just the colour that you're after. And so I like to start off with quite a dark green, almost a turquoise, and this is going to go over the majority of the mini actually, just to get some colours in. So I like to just lay on quite a few different colours when I'm painting these guys. So when I do the oil wash at a later stage, it ties it all together nicely, and just having a bit of variety works really well. So let's check the airbrush is working. There we go. Right. So I'm just going to start at the underside of the mini just to make sure that we get everything, all the shadows and things like that. And my airbrush doesn't seem to be working. That's because I've not plugged it in. That's useful. What have I got plugged in here? Just a second. Some things about going live. There we go. The airbrush is on. Okay. There we go. That's better. Hopefully this isn't too loud for you whilst I'm airbrushing. But I'll try and keep it as quick as I can. So yeah, the most important thing for us is to get underneath and into all the shadows. So everywhere that is currently pretty much black, we'll get this kind of bluish green colour on it. And then I'm just going to hit it on top as well, just lightly. So there we go. You can see that hopefully. So with the effect of the zenithal highlight we've done, you can see that the green is a lot lighter on top than it is underneath, which is what we're looking for. So I'll just crack on and do it with this guy as well. And one of the advantages of this way I'm painting is that you can be quite messy as well, because we're just neating everything up as we go along and tie it all in at the end. And they are going to be Grimdark ghoulies, so it doesn't matter if they do look a bit dishevelled. And just hitting the base as well, just to get a bit of colour on there. There we go. Do the base again. Okay, there we go. Look, kick the camera, that's good. And so for the next step, I'm actually going to go and take an orange now. So this is just, I can't even read what that says, flame orange. Again, not really relevant what the specific brand is. I'm going to mix this straight into the pot. So I've not got a lot of the green left in there. Back in the camera again. And so this is going to create quite a dirty orange, almost a brown, just because it's mixing in with the colours that I've already got in there. Okay, yeah, it's coming through okay. And so then for this bit, this is just going to be going down on top. So we're just laying some of this bright orange. Kind of everywhere, a bit like doing a zenithal prime again, but we're just laying this colour down on top. It's going to give us some really nice contrast compared to the sort of turquoise or the green underneath, because orange and green are really good contrasting colours. So build that up quite slowly. I'm hoping the airbrush isn't too loud and you can actually hear what I'm saying when I'm chatting away to myself while I'm doing this, otherwise I'm wasting my time. Get this going. Again, this can spill over onto the base, and it's fine hitting pretty much anything. It doesn't really matter, because even the metallic elements, we're going to paint them really rusted up anyway, so having a bit of orange on them is not a problem at all. A bit more around the top. Doing again. And you want to try and make sure that you're keeping the top part of the mini as bright as you can, because then that'll really stand out. That's where the contrast is going to be. Okay. Right. So hopefully you can see there that you can still see the green popping through underneath where the shadows are, and then we've got quite a nice, well, dirty orange going through there. I'm just going to take some of this paint out of the cup of my airbrush, because I'm going to put a different lighter colour in now, so I don't want it getting too mucky like the orange did. But a little bit's okay. So the next colour is just like a bone colour, exactly as it says here, skeleton bone. or even like a light tan colour, something like that would do it. We're going to use a little bit of this because we don't need a lot of it at the moment. Oops. Thin it down quite a lot. Test this. There we go. So this is just like doing the extreme highlight of a zenithal highlight, so it's just going to be from the top down only, just to catch the raised surfaces and his limbs, so like the arms and whatnot. Get a little bit on the face, a little bit there. There we go, and that's literally it for that bit. So it's just brightened it up a little bit, and it's took the orange down a bit as well, so we've not got quite as much orange showing through. Okay, put the airbrush down. That'll do for now. Another advantage of me using the airbrush as well is that this is all done really quick and it'll dry quite quick as well, so I can move on to the next step for you without having to sit here waiting for it. But I do also have my hairdryer here handy, so I would recommend always having a hairdryer knocking about, especially if you're painting a couple of different things, because you can get them dry a lot quicker. I'm just going to try drying these off a little bit, so hopefully this isn't too loud for you again. I don't know if you can hear the hairdryer going or not, hopefully not. Just try this out. Okay, there we go. So for the next bit, this is where we'll actually break out the paintbrush for a bit. So my plan now is we're going to paint these, so the lower part of the robes, these ones that I've not put the additional texture on, so we're going to do them white, and then once we've dirtied them up, and we're going to add a bit of blood effects and things like that, so basically the top part is going to be what's all dirty and mucky and grim and brown, and then these bottom bits are going to be sort of white funeral shrouds, I suppose you would call them. So I'm going to use this colour, just because it's called Mummy Robes, which it seems appropriate, but it's basically just it's kind of a dirty white colour, almost like a cream. It'll probably just show up as white on the video anyway, because it tends to, but it's not exactly white. I don't know if you can even see the difference. No, I don't see a difference on the camera, but it doesn't really matter either way. You can get away with the white because we're going to dirty it down anyway later when we put some oil washes on, which I'll show you in a bit. So what I'm going to do for this then, I've thinned it down quite a bit on the palette there, and I'm just going to start laying this on. I'm going to try and be relatively careful to not catch the bits that we've already painted, so we don't have to go back fixing things. But I do still have the sort of the mix that we had from the airbrushing is in the cup of my airbrush, so if I do mess up I can go back and dip in that and just use it to cover up whatever I've messed up. And the aim with this is, because this paint is quite thin, it's not completely covering, and that's absolutely fine, because I can go over the bits and again with another coat of the bits that I want to make a bit brighter. So these bits that are standing out at the bottom ends here, I'll hit them again just to make sure that they're very white, and then the bits that are further in towards the mini itself, we can have more shadows that way, so don't really need to focus too much on those bits, just these outer edges here. Hopefully my hand's not getting in the way while I'm painting. And so this is really, I'll class this as speed painting. This is the way I paint my Chainrasps for the Nighthaunt army I'm doing at the moment, and it's just a process that I've kind of got down to quite a quick, I wouldn't say a fine art, but quite a quick process over the past couple of months, because as you'll know, if any of you paint Chainrasps or any kind of like hard army, when you're having to paint 30, 40 little things like this, and they're all exactly the same. You really want to have some kind of system where you can just fire them out, and this is my system for doing these. It works really well. It's nice and simple, it's not too taxing on the brain, and then you can spend more time doing your big character models and monsters and things like that. So you can probably see on there where I've painted that first layer, it's not dry yet, but it's quite patchy, but that's absolutely fine, as I was saying, so I'll go over the layers where I want to pull out the volume and just make it stand out brighter. I'll just leave him for a second and crack on with this guy. I'm not used to live streaming, so I'm not used to having to speak constantly, so I'm trying to force myself to not sit here in silence. So if I'm just jabbering rubbish, then it's because it's probably better than me just being silent and you listening to me heavy breathing, which would just be a little bit weird. I'm just trying to get this done as quick as I can, then we can get on to the next stage. And I think for the next bit what we'll do is paint the metallic parts. So we've got lots of chains and stuff like that on them, so we'll get them done. So I'm actually just going to whack through this pretty quick. I'm not going to take the usual kind of care and attention that I might do. When it comes to the bits on the inside, so a lot of the bits you might not even be able to see when the mini's completed, especially when they're on the table anyway if you're using them, but some of the bits that are visible of the inside bit of the robe, I would just give them the one coat and just leave it. Even if it's quite patchy, it doesn't really matter because it's not going to be massively noticeable, especially once we put an oil wash on there as well, and that'll just grind it up. There we go. Okay. That's kind of dry. And just paint over a little bit again. Just the outer bits that I want to look brighter, so there's a few raised edges and things like that. I can just catch them. Fine. And I'm just using this is a size 1 brush, I think it is. Yeah. And this will probably be fine for the whole mini, I think. We don't really need like a fine detail brush or anything like that. Okay, so they're both done. I'm just going to get the hair drying on that again for a second. Okay, that'll do. Okay, so they're about right. That's cool. Okay, so moving on to some metal parts, and so what I'm going to do, this is a bit of I kind of find it a bit time saving to do it in a sort of reverse way, so rather than painting them metallic and then painting rust on, what I'm going to do is take, I've got dark brown here, so this is the Leo model colour wood grain, which is one of my favourite browns ever. It's just it's very good, very useful for all kinds of stuff. And it's quite thin, it's actually naturally quite a thin paint, so I don't really need to thin it down once it's on the wet palette. And I'm just going to go around and get all these little bits. just anything that's metal. They've got lots of little chains and padlocks and stuff like that, so just fly around getting these on. And same with the ropes, you might not be able to get all the way into the ones that are on the inside, but it's not going to be the end of the world either, because it's not going to be that noticeable. Sneaky bit there. Same done. That's the next guy. Okay. And sometimes with these guys you might find that you've missed a bit. But I do that all the time, so there's just like that many little random chains and things like that. So just take a minute to have a quick look over it before you move on and make sure that you've not missed anything out. This guy's got one that's going right in under his neck. Oh, that looks fine. There we go. And so now I'm going to go back. This is the same orange that I used before. So whatever orange that you used, you can just keep using. I'm just going to stick that on the wet palette. And I've not washed my brush, so there was some of that brown on, which doesn't matter at all. And so all I'm going to do now is just add a little bit of the orange here and there, and because the brown's not even fully dry yet, we can just kind of blend it in, just get a wet blending, nice and easy. And when you're doing something like this, you can go back and forth as well, especially because I've got both colours on my palette anyway. So if I think I've overdone it with the orange, for example, then I could just go back to the brown and dab it on. But the good thing about when painting stuff like rust is it's very, I won't say organic, it's obviously not organic, but the kind of, it's a natural look, the way it accumulates and spreads and things, so you can just go with whatever you feel looks good, and it doesn't have to be too exact and specific. Just try and keep it a little bit darker on the underside of that blade rather than putting a lot of orange on it. And same there. And just get a bit of orange on here. So what I do like to do sometimes is, when I've painted the metal brown and I'm working this orange in, you can use the orange where you would expect a highlight, so to put more rust at more of the orange rust, the brighter rust, where you would expect more light to naturally fall. So if you're getting basically the benefits of putting a highlight on it without actually having to do any real highlighting, you're just painting rust on. So that'll do for him. And this guy, just crack on with him as well. So again, just starting at the highest bits really, putting a few dabs on and then working it in. Excuse me. I'll block out a bit. And again, if I think I've gone over the top at any point, I can just grab a bit of this brown and just let it mix in, so it's nice and easy. And next head, I'm just going to make that quite messy, so I'm just stifling it, basically just stabbing with the tip of my brush, just letting like patches basically form on the bottom. Right, okay, decent. Then what I'm going to do next, if I can find the paint, there we go. So I'm just going to put a bit of this skeleton bone down. In fact, I've still got it in my airbrush pot, so I could go and get that, but that's behind me and this is in front of me. So what I'm going to do now is just take a bit of this and just going to carefully pick out details on the skull of his face. Chin bone, teeth, eye sockets. I know I'm really doing, rather than doing really big deliberate strokes, I'm just touching the points to the bit of the mini that I want to pick up the colour. So there's a little bit going on. I just want to try and focus the light in the centre part of the face just so it stands out most. For now. So we're going to be putting an Eyewash on anyway, so that will get dulled down a bit, so we might need to come back and freshen that up a bit later on. Again. Let that chin stand out a bit. It's looking alright. Okay, next bit. I'm going to put the blood effect on at this point, so on the white bits. So we'll get that on now, so that when we put the weathering on, it will it'll get toned down a little bit, so it's not going to look too bright and comical. Just need to find what I'm going to use for this. Let's have a look. So when it comes to blood, I don't really have a set recipe or anything like that. I've got a couple of blood effect paints, but I don't know where they are at the moment, so I'm just going to use some regular red paint. I've got some Army Painter washes here that are really good, so I like to use these when I'm doing blood effects. So let's have a look. So I've got two here. I've got a red tone and purple tone, and so I'm going to put these on a palette, and I'll get a little bit of each mixed in with this red, so it'll just thin it down a bit and give me some nice colours to work with. So again, with my size 1 brush, that's that, purple, that one, a bit of red. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so for this, I'm not very clued up on realistic blood splatter and how it works in real life. So what I tend to do is I pick the sort of the internal edges of these, where these rips and tears are, and so I'll just start putting it on, just using the tip and just letting it flow out naturally. So I'll do that one there. Do this little bit down here. Hopefully you can see this okay. So just where this little sort of tear is, putting it on there, and because I'm just dabbing it nice and easily, not putting too much pressure on and letting it flow out the way it wants to, so it's a bit more natural than sometimes try to paint on lines and stripes with blood spatter, because then it can look a bit well, a bit like it's been painted on really. Let it do its own thing. Swap out the lighter one. Just do a few bits around there. So I like to have a mix for when I'm doing blood, so a darker one and a lighter one, just so you've got that kind of contrast between older dried wood and newer wood. Something like that, that's what I say in my head anyway. Just going to go around doing this, and that's kind of the secret to it really, just picking these little points. And the thing is, even if you accidentally overdo it or you think you've overdone it, it's not going to look that bad at the end anyway. And I'm just swapping between the lighter red and the darker red. I do it almost randomly really. I tend to just start off with the darker one and then go for a lighter one afterwards. There. Don't forget to just follow it over from to the inside as well. So if you're doing on the outside, just take the darker one and do it on the inside as well, just in case someone picks your menu up and has a look around it. In there. Just put a little bit more colourful in that, just darken it down. Better. And there's also other little tricks you can use, like taking a toothbrush and loading your paint on it and flicking it with your thumb like that. But I find doing things like that can be a little bit haphazard, and it's easier to end up having most of your model covered in it, which is, well, for my purposes anyway, it's not what I'm looking for. I don't want it too over the top. A few random spots around here. That's a bit of a large area of white. So you can see there, that was just little gentle touches and just letting the paint fall out as it wants to, just to try and make sure that we keep it looking natural. I think that's probably good enough there as well. Right, so I'm just going to give these guys a quick hit with the hairdryer just to make sure that everything on it is dry. Drying. Pretty soon I'll get to the stage where I'm doing an oil wash, and you want to make sure that all the acrylic paint is dry on it before we oil wash, otherwise it's just going to be a disaster. Okay, there we go. Just before the oil wash, in fact, I'm going to just do the arms. So this is Dark Flesh from Whale Model Colours, one of my favourite paints. It's very good for all kinds of things. I'm just going to thin this down a little bit. So this is going to be almost a glaze, very, very thin. And the idea here is I'm just going to be painting the arms, but just the upper side. So this is going to be effectively like a highlight for us. So I'm just not using big brush motions. I'm largely just tapping it where I want the paint to go, just letting it deposit naturally. Try and just get on the upper areas here. And because it's so thin, it will darken down as it dries, so we might need to go over it again. the idea is just to give the, I'm not sure if skin's the right word, but this, whatever his arms are made of, whether it's flesh or some spectral energy or whatever, just to give it a little bit of texture, make it look a bit like it could be, I don't know, like zombified hands, something like that. Do a little bit more. That's just a little bit too thin because it was seeping into the spaces between his fingers there, so I've just added a little bit more paint to that mix just to thicken it a little. Okay. I'm not going to spend too long doing this, it's just a quick extra step just to help differentiate basically the arms and hands from the other similar coloured parts of the mini. And a process like this, if you do have a whole bunch of Nighthaunts that you try to paint, or Chainrasps, sorry, it's a really sort of efficient process to go through each step like this before moving on. And you can fire through them quite quickly, and you don't normally get too bored either because each step is relatively quick. So say we're painting, I don't know, 10 of these guys, it's only going to take you a couple of minutes at each step. So if you've got a couple of hours one night and you're looking at getting a whole unit of these guys done, you can really fire them out quite easily, especially if you are using a hairdryer, so that just saves you so much time. Though if you're doing 10 at a time, you'll probably find that by the time you've finished on one of them, on the last one, then the first one that you painted is dry and ready for the next step. Okay, there we go. So that's just lightened up the skin, or whatever you want to call it, on the arms a little bit. Just give it a bit more contrast to let it stand out. And at this point, we're going to start with Eyewashes. Put this brush to one side. If you haven't used Eyewashes before, they're actually really quite easy. I think they probably feel a lot more intimidating than they actually are. So we'll just crack on with this anyway, and you'll just see how easy it is. My oil paints are down here somewhere. Yeah. So I'm going to be using two, so I'm going to be using black and burnt umber. These are the two most common colours that I use. And the way I'm going to do this, always use an old brush because they'll absolutely ruin your brushes. So I'm going to get a little bit of black. So you see, not a lot at all really, just enough to be able to smear in the bottom of this little cup. Black is a very, very strong colour, especially with oil paint. It's a really strong pigment. And to thin this, I'm going to use white spirit. You can get different thinners like artist thinners and Gamsol and things like that. I just go for white spirit because I can get it in one of my local shops pretty cheap. I'm just going to put a few drops of that in here. And give it a mix. And so you should be able to see already, so we've got a nice wash going on. That's probably a little thinner than what I wanted. Maybe okay actually. just a bit of trial and error, because different oil paints will have different consistencies and different levels of oil and pigment in them, so you tend to just you'll get to know your paints and your thinners and how you like to use them as well. So I do like to use oil paints quite thin as oil washes anyway. Okay, that's better. Right. And so what I'm going to use the black for will be the white robes and any metal, and I'll also just hit the base with it as well. But if there's any overspill, that's not the end of the world either, because we'll be going over the rest of it with once we've added some burnt umber in, and so it will just blend very nicely, nice and easy. So just do that, and it'll look absolutely horrific when you first do it. So don't panic and have a heart attack or anything. But whenever, as soon as you get the oils on to begin with, it will just look like such a mess. You have to kind of trust the process. Yeah. Make sure I've got some over most of the base. Same for this chap. As you can see, it's a really quick process, and you don't need to varnish or anything like that. As long as you know that the acrylic paint that you've got on is dry, if that's fully dried, then you're not going to have an issue. The thinner, the white spirit, whatever you use, it isn't going to attack the paint or anything. So if in doubt, you can give your models time to dry, or I just use my hairdryer on them, get them dry, and get the oil paint on them. I'm going to get set up for the brown now, and so I'm just using the same part that I've got here. I'm just going to get a little bit of umber stuck in the front. The main thing about oils is the smell. So oil paints have a very unique smell to them, and your thinner is also going to smell like white spirit. It has quite a distinct, strong smell to it. So either do it in a well ventilated space, or just do what I do and grow to like the smell of nasty chemicals. Put a little bit more white spirit in here. Back on so don't spill it. Okay, so this brown, well, it's more of a brown black, so I've mixed the burnt umber in with the remaining black, put a little bit of more thinner in, and it's still quite thick. I would say you can see how it coats the inside of that. It's not just all running off. And all we're going to do now is put this over everything that we haven't already covered. So this is going to be the top of the axe, the arms, the face, and the rubs, whatever you want to call them, that we have on the top here. And you'll find that it will likely flow down and mingle with the black oil wash that we've already got on, but that's not a problem at all, because it will just blend nicely. One of the good things as well about the oil washes is they have a very low surface tension, so they flow really nicely and easily into like cracks and crevices and the different textures that you have on the Mini, so it's really easy to get it covered nicely. Okay, there we go, that's those two done. As you can see, they look a bit of a horrific mess at the moment. What I'm going to do now is get the hairdryer out again on them. Normally oil paints, they can take quite a long time to dry, depending what the ratio of thinner to paint it is, because the thicker the oil paint is, the longer it will take to dry, because the oils take a long time to dry. whereas something like this, like white spirit, evaporates very quickly, so the thinner your washes are, the quicker they'll dry. But I'm still quite impatient person, so I do hit them with the hairdryer anyway. So I'm just going to do that now. And what I'm doing is I want the majority of it to dry. Don't want it to be completely cured, because then we can't remove any of it, which is what the next step's going to be. But we just want, you don't really want it to be any sort of real large damp sort of pools of it collected anywhere. You want it to be mostly looking dry. It'll still be quite a bit shiny because of the oils. So what we're going to do next is just carefully remove some of the Eyewash that we've put on. Okay, there we go. And so what I'm going to use for that is a makeup sponge like this. You can see I've been using it before. Some people use, excuse me, cotton buds, Q-tips. I tend to find them a bit too rough. If you're using them and pulling at it, you can sometimes pull away some of the acrylic paint underneath. So I like these sponges because they're nice and soft and do, in my opinion, exactly the same job. So what I'm going to do, I'm just carefully dabbing at the more exposed excuse me, areas. So like the arms there and the top of the robe. What you'll find with the sponges, it'll be absorbing some of it, and it'll also be wiping some of it away as well. So you really just want to remove the heavier staining of the oil paints from the higher areas. So any areas that are facing upwards that you would want to catch more light, you're going to be removing it from those, and you can leave the other areas nice and dark. And it's quite a subtle process, so you can go over it several times before you can see sort of a noticeable effect sometimes. And you can, if need be, put a little bit of white spirit on your sponge or your cotton bud, whatever it might be that you're using, just to help the process a little bit more. But I tend to find I don't really need to do that. I just leave it as it is. I think I'm quite happy with that. And I'm wanting to really focus more, just making sure that I've not got too much around the face and the arm on this particular model. If you look at each model individually and how you want it framed, so I want it to focus to his face there. So I would take away most of the bits from around there. Move on to this guy and do exactly the same. So you can see he's quite messy at the moment. I'm going to take some from the top of his hands and arm there. Skull good wipe. That bony shoulder. Give the robes a bit of a wipe, but they don't need much taken off them really. They look pretty good when they're all dirty like that. Hopefully you can see he's looking pretty grim and messy now as well. That's looking good to me. And so the next thing that I want to do, and a decent brush for dry brushing. I'll find somewhere I'll add it in there again. And so what I like to do, one of my later steps, because we are getting near the end of this now, I like to dry brush over the oils when they're still a little bit wet, because then you get this kind of dirty blend with them that I think looks pretty good, especially when you're doing, you know, these kind of ghosts and like horrible things that you want to look grimy. That will do. A bit of this bone colour I've got here. A bit more. Okay, and so the purpose of this is I'm going to be dry brushing very gently just the bit on the top where we've got all this texture of the cloth and whatnot here, just to pick that up more. And it just makes all the individual bits of the fibres and things like that a bit more noticeable. And it's pretty cool, in my opinion. As you can see, it does blend with the paint that's already on there, the oil paint, because that's not completely dry yet. So you will find that sometimes you'll need to keep adding a little bit of paint. Just a bit more. Move on to the next guy. And when you're dry brushing over oil paint, it's something you can build up easily. So like you can see there, so that's if I then wanted to get rid of it, I could just keep moving around the mini and then come back to it and dry brush it again with less of the paint on, and it'll just blend really nicely, because oil paints are just very good for blending like that. But I actually quite like that heavy bit there, helps it stand out. Okay, looks good. That might be just because I enjoyed how that looks, so I'm just going to hit this a little bit heavier. There we go, that's pretty good. Inside. And obviously as well, because we've done the face with this bone colour before as well, it doesn't matter if we catch it while we're dry brushing. If anything, that might just give us a little bit more definition on the face, so that's fine as well, as you can see. Okay, cool. Right, next step, where are we at? We want to get some metallic paint on here, so we're getting very really near the end now. There's really only 2 steps to go, so we're going to get a bit of metallic paint on where we've painted the rust on the metal, and then we're going to finish the base off, which would be just with a bit more dry brushing. So, right, so I'm just going to use a very dark gunmetal metallic colour and an old brush again, something that I'd be happy to dry brush, because this is effectively what we'll be doing. It's going to be very similar to dry brushing. I suppose we could call it an overbrush, because we're not getting rid of all the paint on the brush. And so the fact that it's quite a rough brush that's got, you know, the bristles are a bit spread apart on it is useful for us on this, because it will give a rough texture on the metal that we're painting. So I'm just going to paint this just by dabbing on it. Not too much pressure at all, just let it build up over time. So it'll catch bits, it'll catch raised areas, rivets, things like that. And you can see that it starts to look like lots of little scratches on it as well. I'll just keep doing that. And sometimes it's best to just do it for a little bit and then move on to the next area, and then come back and have a look at it and see what you make of it, if you're happy with the level, rather than just you can get a bit lost in the moment and keep doing it and doing it and doing it until all of a sudden you've got rid of all your rust and whatnot. So you don't want it completely metallic. I'm quite happy with that. And there's some places where you might just not want to do it at all. You don't need to do all the metal that you've done. So I'll pick out these bits here, like the top of the manacle, just to make sure that that's got a bit of shine to it, and a bit on the padlock there, padlock on the back as well. And that's probably fine. I wouldn't really need to go and do the entire length of the chain. You can just do a little bit just to sort of highlight it. sometimes it works well to do it just anywhere where you think that light might catch. So any bits, of clean metal or scratches that have moved away removed part of the rust, part of the oxidization where it's been knocked off by contact with something, and it's going to glint in the light. You can do that. And again, it's a very quick stage because you're not trying to do every single bit on the Mini. You're picking the bits that are going to look best, so they're just the top of the manacle and then a little bit towards the top of the chain as well. On this little far here, I'm just going to stifle it a little bit so we've got enough to give it a suggestion of a metallic shine at the top. And again, for the sword, this is just going to be light dabs that will just create these little nicks and scratches. And I'm really just going to focus this on the upward facing part, the part that would be catching light rather than the bottom. And I really do find that kind of level of contrast quite pleasing, where we've had a layer of brown, the wood grain, there's been some orange mixed into it, then we've had the black oil wash over the top as well that's kind of melded them all together, and then a little bit of metal on top will really stand out. There. That's pretty good. Yeah, move that. There's that. Okay, and so next step we're going to finish off is the bases, and now I actually really like the kind of colours that we've got on there at the moment because it's had that mix of pretty much everything that we used building up the original layers. So it's had the green and blue, it's had a bit of the brown, the black wash has gone onto there as well, the oil wash, and that's still going to be relatively damp on there as well because I've not dried it off or given it a lot of time to dry. So what I'm going to do is go back to this colour, the Stark Flesh. Again, as I said earlier, it's one of my favourite paints. It's really useful, and what I find is for dry brushing bases, or even for terrain and things like that, it gives a really quite a creepy kind of organic look to it, rather than dry brushing with a white colour or like a light colour that you might normally do using a skin tone. Just gives it a bit of a, I don't know, it makes it look sinister to me, and it'll blend in really nicely because the oil paints have still got the liquid there as well. So I'm just going to catch basically the raised areas. And hopefully this ties in really well with the rest of the Nighthaunt, because we get this sort of grim, dead looking base. So it could be nighttime, or it could be just like a haunted graveyard or something that they're in. So hopefully you can see that where it's picked up the texture there. Just do the same for this guy. Okay, I'm not taking a huge amount of care, just picking like the higher bits like that. I'll just make sure that I try and get the ridge just so it stands out a bit, and the lower bits are still going to have quite a bit of oil paint that's drying anyway, so if you go in there with it, it's just going to kind of mix in and get a bit muddy. But that's perfect, that's cool, that's exactly what we want. And so those are looking pretty good, in my opinion anyway. I'll pop that in there. Sorry, when I say pop that in there, I was just putting my brush in the water pot that I've got over there. And what I'm going to do next is pretty much my favourite part of painting, which is painting the base room. I say my favourite, it's not my actual favourite, but I think it's the most the most satisfying part right at the end, where you hit the rim black, and then it's kind of complete. And I always paint the rims of my minis black, just because I think it looks good. It's a really good sort of framing device, and when they're on the table or if they're being photographed, whatever, even if the tabletop that they're on might not match your basing, the black rim means that they still look too out of place. And it's just a little touch like that I think makes your army look really smart. So I do like seeing an army where they've all got nice neatly painted black rims for some reason. I see that. Not that there's anything wrong with painting in different colours if that's what you like, but my personal choice is a black rim. I just think it works really well. And there we go. That's how I paint my Chainrasps. Just looking at the time, and that's been pretty much spot on an hour, which is I don't think it's too bad to have two minis painted completely, and almost dry, not quite dry. So what I'll probably do in a moment is get a couple of photos of them and fire them up on Instagram, so you'll be able to see the finished product and hopefully a bit better in a photograph. And so yeah, I hope that's been useful. I hope the sound has been okay, and that the video quality has been okay, and it's not buffered too much. And I just hope there hasn't been loads of shitty problems going on that I'm completely unaware of. Given this is my first stream, it was quite a process to get set up for it. But there we go, it's over and done with now. So thanks very much to those of you who've took part and watched. I really appreciate it. See ya.